doors got closed. That probably is the sign that we should start now, I guess. So, welcome to the session of Digital Transformation SAP on Microsoft Azure. My name is Jürgen Thomas, with Microsoft for nearly 22 years. All what I did for Microsoft in the 22 years is working somehow with SAP and Microsoft products. Right now I'm leading a development team in Azure development that is focused on SAP. So I have people in the SAP headquarters in Waldorf that do some development there with SAP. I have some other people in the field in APAC, North America, and Europe. Also as another person that will present, that will show some demos towards the end of the session, we have Takayuki Hoshino here. He will introduce himself afterwards, or when he has his slot here. So, let's start with the contents. What do we want to show here? We will go through the two different sections here. The one being, hey, SAP on Azure, what can we do, what can we not do, what did they have on customer cases, all these kinds of things. And then, as mentioned, demos. So, start of SAP on Azure. Why would you as a customer think about SAP on Azure? And what do we see from Microsoft's side, how customer decision making is done? Now, when we look from the Microsoft point of view, it is very often that we see that the move to public cloud, the move to change the model and how you run SAP systems is driven from the top down. It's usually decisions that are triggered by some interrupts. An interrupt might be, hey, I'm running out of hardware, my hardware is running out of service. Oh, look, I'm sitting on HPUX and Oracle. That might not be a platform I want to invest in anymore. And today, 2017, even 2016 or 15, discussions then are coming up, hey, what about us moving larger parts of our IT world, our software world, into public cloud? Very often the discussions are not circling only around the SAP landscape that we are looking at, that we are all specialists for. Very often what we are seeing, the customer thinks about it thinks about public cloud for the whole of IT. What are our alternatives of running own data centers? What are our alternatives in scaling certain applications? Think about some of the car manufacturers, where it's all about your telemetry data. If they want to collect that all on premise, what a car today delivers them, it's humongous. It's a humongous scale and humongous CapEx investments. And inside security and compliance, as the rules strengthen around that area, you as a customer are often very challenged to implement those. It goes down to firefight, compliance with the fire protection and other things in security and compliance that cost you a lot of effort running your own data centers. Then cloud economics, business continuity, the same thing. It is a lot of effort for you to implement those, and from that point, and so you look for alternatives there. And so all these aspects inside of data, application development, the agility behind application development, the problems you have strapping up systems, development systems, if you do new projects, all these kinds of things lead kind of towards a consumption model, where you only want to consume infrastructure out of a public cloud, and that automatically leads then stepwise to implement software that you're running in-house into such a public cloud. As mentioned, in a lot of customer cases, it's not only the SAP landscape we are talking about. In most of the customer cases, the SAP landscape is basically one of many that we are talking about. And it's certainly not the first workload that a customer moves into a public cloud or into Azure. In most of the customer cases, we see many other workloads moving into Azure first before we tackle the SAP landscape, simply because the customer needs to get acquainted to public cloud, to Azure, needs to change processes in order to adapt to it, to get the agility and flexibility. What are we seeing now specifically in terms of Azure and how SAP customers move? We look in basically 3 different categories. Right now, we see a lot of customers that try to get into Azure with their traditional hosted SAP platform. Means some Windows or Linux operating system, some of the databases that SAP calls NEDB. Means all those databases except HANA. That is a trend right now that strengthened quite a bit, or that took a lot of drive over the last 12 months, where customers are like, oh, this S4HANA thing is having a dramatic impact. It's not that easy to move to. That's not a technical upgrade anymore. There's a lot of business process re-engineering with it. So that takes longer. I need to do that on a platform where I'm super agile. I don't know how many test systems, how many systems I need for my business users to look into, to evaluate, and do all those things. So I can't do CapEx investment on that. So I want to do that in a very flexible platform, agile, where I only can consume or pay what I consume. So ideally in public cloud. And so they try, meanwhile, to get into public cloud with their traditional Windows Oracle, Linux Oracle, SQL Server thing. We have customers that do MaxDB, that are in Azure with or SAP ASE. So they try to really move into cloud right now with existing, and then forward-looking move to S4HANA. We have other ones that try to move into Azure with using ERP and HANA. So you do bless you. We do DMO processes that move from an Oracle, from a SQL Server, into HANA, into Azure. That were these customers 18 months ago. That was nearly all the projects we had. Today, they go a little bit into the background, and the customers changed a little bit to number 1. And then we have the greenfield implementations, where we still see a lot of customers right now that never had SAP, but immediately start and talk about public cloud, either for the complete development or the complete deployment or partial deployments. From an Azure point of view, we have a great momentum. What we want to achieve is that deployment of SAP landscapes, the SAP systems into Azure, whatever nature the SAP systems are, is becoming a commodity. You don't need to go to Microsoft or in order to get to do an architecture there or something like that. Take an example over the last 20 years. One of our focus, or my focus, and my team's focus was SQL Server underneath SAP workload. Today, even with largest SAP deployments on SQL Server, we hardly are engaged from a development point of view. It must be a humongous customer, a humongous deployment where we still engage. Customers and partners can do that alone. And we need to get to the same state within the next 18, 24 months, where it's completely normal for you as a customer or for a partner to deploy into Azure, with SAP systems into Azure. And so that's kind of where we are on track. Every weekend we see customers that take SAP systems into Azure without us knowing. Today I met already 4 or 5 customers that came to us at a booth, said, hey, look, I'm running some SAP systems in Azure, and guess what? Never heard from those customers, which is great. That's exactly what we want. So far, we have customers in all kinds of industries as well. It's manufacturing, high tech, a retail customer, financial industry, especially out of auditing, and then even a larger airline that we moved out of DB2 mainframe into Windows SQL Server and completely into Azure as well. 70% of the customers that we see today are moving in their traditional NEDB platforms. Sure, they all ask for the future of Azure in regards to HANA. What do we have to offer for HANA? But right now, their move into Azure is with the traditional database and not with HANA immediately. And we see more and more customers, as I mentioned, that are trying to move S4HANA into Azure as well. When we look at the different stages that the customers are and how customers deploy into Azure, you're not starting with a big bang here. Sure, if you do a greenfield deployment, you start with development systems in Azure, you do some test systems, and then you finally go into production. Also not a big bang. Even if we do what we call a lift and shift, so there's a customer running SAP on SQL Server, even then, we are not taking 50 systems on one weekend and throw them all into Azure and hope that on Monday everything will be great, because he usually figures out it isn't. So we see customers taking different stages and different steps in order to move into Azure. The first one that we had, which surprised us 3 years ago, the customers tried to use Azure exclusively as a disaster recovery site. That one, meanwhile, that tendency we see going a little bit back. Most of those customers are also now running development systems, test systems in Azure as well. But then we have customers that are in a phase where only non-production systems are running in Azure. That might be not because they don't trust Azure, but because they just started. So the most sensitive thing then to say is, look, I'm taking a few of my non-production system, mostly development system, move them into Azure, see how the thing is running, see what I need to change. Do I take the normal procurement process in order to get a VM in Azure? Hopefully not, because that's killing my agility. So hey, I need to introduce a process where the SAP basis team can go in and say, hey, I want to deploy a VM in Azure because the business unit XYZ wants to have a test system or a copy of that system. So me as basis admin, I need to be able to create a VM in Azure. You won't believe it, that's very often a bigger problem in companies. And so these are the things when you are small invested into Azure with non-production systems, these are the things you figure out, you adjust. Then usually we see customers that are running all non-production systems in Azure. There's actually a global auditing company who does exactly that. They have like a few hundred SAP systems, they're all running in Azure. I call them as middle because the investment in the sense of what systems are in there. Sure, from their investment having a few hundred VMs, it's already a larger thing. But then we have customers where some production systems and all the non-production systems are running in Azure. Very normal state of a customer that invested into Azure, moves systems into Azure, but now gets stuck a little bit because we might not have the virtual machine size that they need. They might need a 128 CPU database server for their ERP system, which we did not have 2 months ago. We released them now a month ago, so meanwhile we have them. But these are cases where we definitely have customers, where we have customers in a stage where they are waiting for the next generation VMs or size of VMs so that they get enough subs throughput on a single VM so that they can deploy larger production systems as well that need 128 CPUs, a terabyte or 2 terabyte of memory. Then we have the X-large customers with their investment where the complete landscape of SAP runs in Azure, and usually more than just the SAP landscape, depending on how we draw the circle around SAP landscapes. You have Vertex, you have some batch scheduler, you have all these kinds of things that usually move into Azure as well. So when we look at one of the customer examples, I mentioned a global auditing company that runs all their 150 non-production systems in Azure. They were one of our first customers. We were just certified when they started deploying massively, and they leverage Azure now in a high degree for SAP workload, but as well non-SAP workload. Sure enough, they started with non-SAP software, with non-SAP systems to load into Azure, and they started doing the Azure thing as they became familiar, as they kind of trusted the Azure as a platform, as they had all their processes lined up in the line to really use Azure and administrate and operate systems in Azure. And then we have other customers that run complete SAP landscapes in Azure, like a company out of New Zealand, Sespri. We have a case study on Microsoft.com/customers. They were one of the first ones that 2 years ago already did that for a smaller landscape, 60, 70, 80 VMs, but very well operated, very well moved into Azure. So very positive experience. We have another huge company that runs a 10 terabyte ERP system in Azure, plus a multi-terabyte SAP BW. We moved them off of AIX DB2. They had on BW, they used BWA. They changed into Windows and SQL Server and use column store indexes now in SQL Server with BW as well. And now they do exactly what I mentioned before. Now they deployed the first S4 HANA systems in Azure to evaluate functionality, to see what S4 HANA 17.10 can do, to really evaluate with their businesses. And the businesses are coming now out of all corners, and the financial department wants to have a system, the sales guys want to have a system, the logistics department wants to have another system. So it's easy for them now to take our VMs and deploy system after system of S4 HANA, wipe it out again if the business finished with the evaluation, and really pay as you go here and pay as you consume. From a Microsoft point of view, you always hear that we have these different virtual machine sizes. So basically, not all the virtual machines, as you see here on this slide, are certified for SAP. I marked the ones with some comments that are certified for SAP. So first of all, from the selection point of view, we usually, from a VM series, try to fill certain gaps, fill in for certain workloads. There are workloads that are less memory intensive, but are more CPU intensive. And then we have more memory intensive workloads and other workloads that need GPU support, for example. So we try to fill those gaps with specific VM series, like the N series or the H series for HPC, high performance computing, and so on. Now for the SAP space, we usually tend to use the memory intensive VM series because we all know databases live off that. There's one called SAP HANA that only lives off memory, mostly. Even the SAP application instances are quite memory hungry if we think about the extended memory, the program cache, and all those kinds of things. When we look at it, we have, in terms of certifications with SAP, we have an A and a D series version 2 as well, which are Netweaver certified, which are standard SKUs. You have somewhere between 2 CPUs, 14 gigabyte as the smallest unit. Then you go up to like 20 CPUs and 140 gigabytes. So make decent database servers, especially if you take the larger one, the D15. Give good application instances. Most of our customers are creating application instances, taking VMs, 8 CPUs, 16-ish CPUs, 100-something gigabyte memory, and use those as application layer. So decent systems, works pretty well. What we lately introduced then are an E-Series version 3 and D-Series version 3, where we basically go up into spaces again of 64 CPUs, 443 gigabyte of memory, where you already have decent database servers, where a lot of the customers, a lot of US customers can run even production systems on from a database point of view, and no doubt about you can use them for application instances anyway. And again, the VM series we usually offer is nicely staggered, starts with 2 CPUs, and a little bit memory, well, usually a 4 or 8 to 1 ratio with E-Series version 3 and D-Series version 3. And then like stacks up 4 CPUs, double the memory of the one with 2, and so it goes on up to the top where you finally have the 64 CPUs, and then with the D-Series version 3, 256 gigabyte of memory, or E-Series version 3, 443. We are currently doing the Netweaver certification with the D-Series version 3 and the E-Series version 3. HANA certification will follow in Q1 next year. Another VM series that's established a long time ago, which is HANA and Netweaver certified, is G-Series, up to 32 CPUs, 448 gigabyte. You can run S4 HANA on it. It's OLAP certified. The only one we have a little bit issue from a workload point of view is OLTP, where SAP didn't like some of the things, and so they didn't certify that necessarily. However, can use it for non-production any point in time. Then we have a large one. We basically changed tack a few years ago and introduced new host hardware that's 4-socket. So we really took 4-socket hardware and deployed it in a hyperscale cloud in huge deployment units. And so that's called the M series, which is Netweaver certified, HANA certified very soon. And that basically offers you up to 4 terabyte to use for HANA workloads and 128 CPUs. So that's really a large thing that enables now, that unblocks a lot of HANA use cases, But even more important, it does really unblock a lot of non-HANA workloads as well. We have a massive amount of customers that look into database servers that use 64, 96, 128, 144 CPUs that they run their ERP database on, where they need 100,000 subs, and where this M-series is exactly doing that. But sooner or later, I mentioned 4 terabyte, there's a break. With 4 terabyte, it's our largest VM. We have customers that are deploying HANA, and so what happens if you reach the 4 terabyte? You're sitting on S4 HANA, so it's not, scale out's not exactly a possibility. So yeah, we can do scale out with S4 HANA, but conditions are a little bit more strict, like your node needs to be at least 6 terabyte. Well, our VM only has 4. What do we do? What does the customer do? That's where we are pretty unique in Azure. We don't let you down. You are not falling off the cliff, off the edge. There is something we call HANA large instances, or there's a longer name, I already forgot it. It's way too long. We also call it S-series. So if you see something like S192 instead of M128, this S-series is what we call HANA large instances. And in that case, we can go up to hardware that is 20 terabyte in size. Means you also have 20 CPUs in that server. So that's what we are offering. We see slides later on that describe HANA large instances. As mentioned, we are starting small, 2 CPUs with 14 gigabyte. That's the smallest thing we offer you. And you can go up to, at the end, 960 CPUs and 20 terabyte of memory in our HANA large instances. I called it out as hardware as a service. I have nobody, our bosses in Microsoft didn't review these slides. They hate the expression hardware as a service. But at the end, let's be true, you'll see that that is what it comes down to. So I called it out as that. From a reliability point of view, that's another aspect when we transform systems into Azure. So we are sitting with the customer. We do an assessment. We do a design review with the customer. And now the thing comes up like, hey, what are our SLAs here? What do we have in Azure? Do we need to, we know, or the customers, the basis team knows what the SLAs are to the business. And so what we have as a pretty unique capability in Azure, or a statement in Azure, is that we have a single virtual machine SLA of 99.9%. No other hyperscale cloud provider is offering that. We do have another SLA that's related to an Azure availability set, where we offer a 99.95. What's an availability set? Think about you deploying 2 virtual machines in what we call an Azure availability set, and we'll make sure, Azure makes sure that these VMs are in different fault domains, different update domains, so that if you have the high availability set up for your application in those VMs, we are arguing in 99.95%, one of those VMs is available. That's what availability set is about. So what we saw now first customers doing as they see the 99.9% availability of single VMs is to say, look, I think for that system here, I guarantee a 99% SLA to my business. Might be I don't need high availability there. Might be I don't need the SAP ASCS, SCS done with NQ replication over 2 VMs. 99%, they offer 99.9. Hell, I can do it without. So these are things that we also go through in assessments with the customers, or that our partners do with customers, so that they look at SLAs that are given towards the business, look into our SLAs, and then figure out how we can shrink the footprint here, whether we have a necessity for high availability for certain SAP components or not. So what are the building blocks of high availability? Let's look into in-region availability. So in Azure, we basically look at geopolitical regions, being here North America being one, classical example, Australia being one, or Europe being one. And then we drill down into so-called Azure regions, of which we usually at least have 2 in each geopolitical region. So basically, we have Sydney and Melbourne in Australia. We do have Amsterdam and Dublin in Europe. And so then from there on, we go down into data centers. So there might be more than one data center. There is more than one data center usually in an Azure region. And then we drill down into clusters. And then we drill down into fault domains and the upgrade domains. And when you look at an availability set, and the availability set is addressing within one Azure region, within one cluster, different fault and update domains. So I deploy 2 or more VMs, and they are distributed in different fault and update domains. Means if a power supply that drives one, or power that drives one fault domain goes down, it's not affecting all your virtual machines in that availability set. Where are we using that in SAP? In SAP ASCS, SCS, or the old CI. We take 2 VMs, we build a cluster, either a Windows cluster or in Linux a pacemaker cluster with Stoned device, and we deploy it in an availability set. I have different forward and update domains, and then the ASCS, SCS, include replication services with it, can fail over using either the Windows cluster or the pacemaker cluster. Database is the same thing. On a database side, we basically look at the native database functionalities that the databases have. In SQL Server, it's a classical always on. Oracle, you use the data guard side functionality, or in SAP HANA, it's SAP HANA system replication that you can set up using a pacemaker cluster with Stoned device onto Azure VMs, deployed into 2 different fault domains, and you can achieve an availability of 99.95% on Azure VMs with such a technology and such functionality. Cross-region availability, it's usually where we need to replicate things into another region. I mentioned here in Europe, we have Amsterdam and Dublin. So the customer deploys production, let's say in Amsterdam, and says, I want to have my disaster recovery site is Dublin. What we usually do there, we have 2 methods that what we saw customer doing. One is without Azure Site Recovery Services, where customers are running test systems in Dublin already, in their DR site, where the test system is a complete image of the production image, and then they have pre-installed production instances there. They use CNAMEs in the VMs, and they simply move the CNAMEs over into the DR site, have the different IP address assigned to the CNAMEs in the DNS, and then bring up those instances. On the database side, the customer then uses something like always on as an asynchronous replica, HANA system replication, asynchronously in order to get the data over to the DR side. The other possibility is using something that we that we introduced lately is Azure Site Recovery Services. We introduced that as a tool that you could use for on-premise to Azure replication, for Azure being the DR site. These days we have a scenario that we call Azure to Azure, or A to A. And that is the one that you're using today in order to replicate SAP application instances into the DR site and having them available there, so that you only need to bring them up in the DR case. As mentioned, database building blocks, we usually use the native database functionality in order to do that. We are currently investigating how A2A could handle high volume database traffic as well. That's still a scenario that we need to investigate a little bit more. But so far, we built those systems usually using the database building blocks. From what we can do in Azure in terms of certifications and everything, we look basically into Business Suite on Netweaver. That means basically everything and anything that runs on Netweaver. Take extended warehouse management, take whatever's using the Java stack of Netweaver or the ABAP stack of Netweaver. You can throw that stuff into Azure without asking. The operating systems we are supporting is Windows Server, SUSE Linux, SLES. Red Hat Linux, and see there, Oracle Linux we do as well. And SAP also was compromisable, so we meanwhile can offer support of Oracle RDBMS on Oracle Linux in Azure as well with SAP. Well, we as Microsoft could offer that before already, but without SAP software on it. Now SAP agreed, after long discussions, after a long series of tests, that yes, we are fine. SAP is fine for us to offer customers with Oracle Linux. They can move their Oracle DBMS into Azure and use and run SAP application layers on Oracle Linux as well. As of databases, we have from a Netweaver certification, we have everything in there, MaxDB and SAP ASE, Oracle, DB2 SQL Server. You'll see a HANA slide separately on that. Also the VM series, we have as good as everything that we really want to support with SAP. I mentioned the E series version 3, D series version 3 is in process right now. So that will be checked off like in 4 weeks. Then sure, you can do the live cache. We have customers that do run SCM in Azure. Valid scenario. T-Rex, yes, we have customers that come with e-recruiting and say, look, in e-recruiting, I have the T-Rex engine here. I need that in Azure as well. Hell, yes, you can do it. SAP Content Server, even that is possible. Then business objects or BI platform 4.1, 4.2, you can run that in Azure. Data services is included. We are currently working with them to get the Linux side certified as well. At the moment, it's only on the Windows platform. They're working, doing that SAP development sites, working in doing some tests on Linux as well, so that we can check the box as well. And SAP Business One finally will come as well very soon. There's the official statement in all, or the statement that I got from the product management of SAP is like, what? SAP Business One on SQL Server? Everybody's doing that already. Why do you want to have a support statement about that? Our partners do that already. That seems to run. Go ahead and do it. And it's only about SAP Business One on HANA. Everything that has to do with HANA is a little bit more sensitive, dealt with a little bit more process behind it. So that is something that will be done very soon as well. It's the HANA thing, HANA Developer Edition, all that stuff is running on Azure. You can do it, you can play around with it. SAP Business One on HANA, as I mentioned, very soon. S/4HANA, you can run, there's a beta program, or SAP calls it controlled availability with S/4HANA. We can do that on our GS5 VM series or VMs. And then we have non-production and production on our HANA large instances. And very soon we will have M series here sitting as well as one of the VM series that you can use for this workload as well. Then we have the two traditional ones, the Business Suite and the BW on HANA or BW for HANA that are able on GS5 as well, or OLTP only non-production, but for OLAP production as well on GS5, and then HANA large instances, as well workloads that are going to be addressed with the M series. And no doubt, HANA large instances, as I mentioned, you're looking into somewhere between 768 gigabyte and 20 terabyte on memory that you can cover there. You'll see that in the next few slides. Exactly. Now let's go to HANA large instances. As I mentioned, HANA large instances basically, can you see it, look at that way, it can be a safety net for you if you deploy in VMs. S/4HANA suddenly explodes in terms of data volume and needs memory, more memory, more memory. And suddenly, woo, now 4 terabyte are eaten up, what I'm going to do now. And that's where HANA large instances come into the game. That's where HANA large instances can help you tremendously. Now, initially we didn't design it for that. Initially we rolled it out and designed it for customers to move HANA into Azure. Where we were limited to 448 gigabyte. Because the M series we just launched 4 weeks ago, yeah, now I can talk about it, but like 3 months ago, I had nothing to offer. So if a customer wanted to move with a 2 terabyte system, S4 system into Azure, the only thing we had was HANA large instances. So and that's exactly what we see here now in nowadays, like now, we are covering up to 3.5, in actuality it's 4 terabyte, we are just changing that. We are covering 4 terabyte really with the VMs. And then I have HANA large instances going up to 20 terabyte. A few months ago, my little box there down on the right was only going 448. So that's where HANA large instances, starting with 768 gigabyte memory, came in and helped us a lot over the last year in deploying quite a few customers. So how is that thing looking like about HANA large instances and the strategy here? So basically in all the cases, we expect the middleware, the application layer of SAP to run on Azure virtual machines. Now, as we then offer larger and larger virtual machines, we enable capabilities of running larger SAP HANA systems. And that's the ideal scenario. You are in all virtual machines, everything's fine for you, we are growing with you. But as mentioned, like months ago, there was nothing like a VM that had 1 terabyte, that had 2 terabytes, that had 4 terabytes. So we basically had HANA large instances and still have HANA large instances that covered that edge. And what we are going to do, or what we are doing with HANA large instances, we will always be at least a step or two ahead with capabilities of that hardware compared to our virtual machines. Because the HANA large instances we can deploy in smaller batches. We can deploy a few servers, we can deploy 3-4 racks of it, instead of coming with a humongous cluster that we need to deploy as a unit of a hyperscale cloud. So we can afford to eventually invest way more money into a single server instance that has 20 CPU and 20 terabyte to enable a customer to run the mass of SAP systems in Azure and even get the largest ones into Azure as well, and not run in a hybrid kind of scenario where they still need to invest into their CapEx on-premise and then have the rest of the landscape in Azure. So we want to enable those customers moving with their complete landscape into Azure, even with largest SAP HANA systems. Scale out, jump over that. So what is HANA large instances? What do we have on SKUs? You see that we are starting with a pretty small SKUs. The number always characterizes. So you see the S, that's the class. That's our SKU class. And then you see a number. That number is always the number of CPU threads. So you see a 2-socket machine that has 72 CPU threads, 768 gigabyte. We introduced that over a year ago. That was the start of it. And so we enabled customers that had small business warehouses, smaller systems that did not fit into our largest VM. We enabled them to deploy in Azure. Subsequently, we went up the stack and had 192 CPUs. And meanwhile, we introduced 384 CPUs, and you see the whole slide, you see the whole thing on SKUs that we have that are going up to quite a number of CPU threads and that are going quite high in the memory. Now they are different. There are some fine differences, especially when we go beyond 192, that express itself in not only in the pricing, but also in the handling and how fast we are to deploy these for customers. Don't go into those details here. If you want to learn more about it, we can certainly, there's certainly a lot of material on the docs.microsoft.com that explains a lot of the architecture and some of the fine differences here. How does the whole thing look like at the end? So if you are in an Azure region, you have a subscription, you want to deploy something in Azure, usually the first thing you need to do after you have your subscription and you use it and everything, you need to create a VNet. And usually when I'm serious about Azure, or me as a customer serious about Azure, I'm going in and establish a link between my on-premise assets, data centers, and Azure. That's usually done with a VPN line. You can do that. Customers that are really serious about running running mission-critical systems in Azure usually establish something called express route. You go to level 3 or your MPLS provider, say, hey, I want to have an express route connection set up between on-premises and Azure. You have two choices here. You can have a metered one, and you can have an unmetered one. Bandwidth is going up to 10 gigabit. It's obvious that the unmetered one is quite expensive, whereas the metered one is, well, digestible from a price, and usually works out pretty well. So that's the line that you see from your customer thing in the graphics going up to Azure. And now I have this express route thing sitting there in Azure from me. I need to connect it somehow to my assets there. And that frame I connect it to is a VNet. I create a virtual network there. I take an IP address range that is not used on-premise. So, because now with the express route, I basically extended my DNS, I extend my ID into Azure. Azure is just like an extended data center of mine that has all the necessary functionalities. And now I basically hook that up into the VNet and and everything that I deploy in the VNet is visible from on-premises, or on-premises can look into what I deployed there. So I can have a solution manager on-premise, and I have an SAP system in Azure. And guess what? That solution manager can contact the host agent that is in each of those VMs and gets all the data there. So now, HANA Large Instances, as I mentioned, is something special. That's a different hardware SKU that has a different stamp size that we put aside and hooked it up into that Azure VNet as well. So basically, that's what this picture should characterize. So we used some technology like the express route technology that we basically used to connect that HANA Large Instance stamp with the Azure VNet of the customer, and then we carve out a tenant in the HANA Large Instance stamp. The tenant can be as small as 1 blade, but we also have tenants that are meanwhile 20 blades. So customers can have the choice. You can always add more, add more, add more. That's a nice thing about the cloud. You can also take away to a degree, but we prefer to grow. So you can add more. And that is, and the isolation within the HANA Large Instance stamp is basically on VNet level, the tenant level. It's on storage virtual machine level, where we have volumes that are assigned to a storage virtual machine that only can be assigned to that storage virtual machine, that only can be accessed through that storage virtual machine. And then we have the isolation level of a compute unit. Compute unit is nothing else than a blade or a server. These are not divided amongst customers. There's no LPAR, no logical partitioning of those things. If you want to have a 12 terabyte thing or an 8 terabyte thing, then we don't carve it out of a 20 terabyte one. We'll buy a 8 terabyte server for you, and that thing is basically used just by you. And what you do is you access it out of a virtual machine in Azure. You access it with SSH, and there you find yourself on the Linux operating system that is sitting directly on the bare metal. That is the principles here of HANA Large Instances. High availability works like on bare metal. You can do an end-to-end, like a scale-out for BW with 1 or 2 or 3 standby nodes as you wish and desire. You can do HANA system replication as you desire. And the only restriction right now that we are working off to get rid of that, hopefully in the next half year, 9 months, from a disaster recovery, you currently rely on a storage replication that we are doing, that we are offering between 2 HANA Large Instance stamps. In the US, we have at the moment US East and US West. Sydney, Melbourne we have in Australia, and Amsterdam, Dublin in Europe. But that's a thing that we are working on to get the HANA system replication enabled as well for disaster recovery between 2 different HANA Large Instance stamps that are sitting in 2 different regions. So that's basically it. HANA Large Instances, as mentioned, you have the bare metal. The virtual machines are sitting in Azure. You connect down to the bare metal that's sitting in a separate stamp. isolated, like you would be in Azure with VNet, with separate storage virtual machines. And very important to note, because it caused a lot of confusions with my counterparts in SAP. They could not believe that we would spend that we would not buy large servers and partition them down. No, that's not happening. If you have a blade, if you want to have a S72 with 768 gigabyte, this is a single blade that has 2 CPUs and 768 gigabyte on it. The only customer that can access that and is accessing it, that's you. The other thing, from a principal point of view, the moment we are handing that blade over to you as a customer, we are out. At the deployment process, at no point in time we have access to your Azure subscription. Our operations has no access to that. At the moment you log in to one of those units, you are forced to change the root password, and from that moment on, our operators, nobody from the Microsoft side can access that system. From that moment on, like with Azure Virtual Machines, you're responsible for the administration, the operations, the patching of the operating system that runs on that bare metal thing. It's the same like virtual machines. So the question is, how do we support that hardware in case of any issue? We have the normal Azure support where you open support tickets like the hardware seems to hang. Let's say you try to reboot and the hardware is not coming back. You open a normal support ticket. It's getting routed into a queue specifically for HANA large instances. Our operations will basically then go into that and will go into the backend management plane of the HANA large instance system. We'll look on the console what's happening, can force reboots or something like that. But what they can't do is go into the console, type in the root password, and do something, because they don't have the root password anymore. So this is not possible. So things like that we then solve with customers, with screen sharing and all those kinds of things in order to really get down to the problems. So, but now let's head over to the second phase of the presentation. That would be Takayuki. Hey, here we go.
Thank you again.
Thanks.
Okay, so just using the rest of time, I want to show you something pretty that can lead to your next action. So just setting up something in SAP in Azure. So anyone in this room very familiar with SAP Cloud Appliance Library? Raise your hand. I really want to make sure that everyone in the room just access to this HTTPS cal.sap.com. I think in this SAP TechEd event, there's a session regarding SAP Cloud Appliance Library, SAP Cal. This is a very useful tool for you to play around with SAP solution, and that can be deployed to Azure. Maybe I can quickly kind of show you calsap.com to help you set up setting up SAP Dev Test in Azure. So I have already created an account in SAP Cloud Appliance Library. Then once you see the solution tab, and I search by Azure, then as you can see the list of pre-built SAP solution. If you are interested in S/4HANA, this one is S/4HANA for chemical industry. And also, if you are interested in BW for HANA, or this one is S/4HANA 1610, BW for HANA, and all the SAP pre-built solution available in this SAP Cloud Appliance Library. And nice things of SAP CAL is, for example, maybe you can pick BW HANA trial version, and once you hit the create instance button, I look through all this longish, URL, and accept that. Then I can give you a nice name. Cloud provider, obviously Azure. Oh, I think I'm using a different account, sorry. I mean, my point is, once you register my Azure subscription in this system, then I can very easily, quickly deploy these, previewed SAP solution package to my Azure subscription. So I mean, even my 10-year-old son can quickly do it. So why not you? And so this is a VM. This is Azure portal, and I use the SAP CAL to deploy the BW HANA. Usually, it takes me like 60 minutes to complete the deployment. Just click on next, next, next. Then you wait for 60 minutes. Then you are going to see the SAP solution in the VM in your Azure portal. So in this case, I deployed this SAP BW HANA in. So this one is deployed in West Europe. West Europe, and the virtual machine size is H16. It's a 16 CPU and 112 gigabyte physical memory. And if I want to kind of save a cost, I can kind of change the size from here. And also I can kind of shut down the VM if once I finish this demonstration, I need to make sure that this VM needs to be shut down. Otherwise, I'm going to get bill from Azure Operations Center. So you can change the virtual machine type, once you finish the deployment. So this is a very easy way for you to kind of play around with the SAP's previous solution and in Azure. So this doesn't cost anything for SAP software. Completely zero SAP software cost, in this SAP CAL. And as for Azure cost, we have some free trial, program. And also, if you're coming from a customer and a partner side, you can contact Microsoft account team to give you some special trial or Azure credit program. So also, for Azure side, the cost is going to be quite minimum to play around with this environment. So this is a very easy way. And also, in case if you want to kind of set up maybe S/4HANA, BW HANA, or SAP IRIS environment, and if you want to kind of manually create, you can do that. And we have a nice, guidance, which is step by step. It's a bunch of screenshots. So basically, it's in Azure portal. I can also just quickly demo. So from new button, I'm just searching SUSE Linux for SAP. So SUSE SAP 12 SP3 seems to be this seems to be the latest version. Also, you can use Red Hat Linux for SAP. And I push the create button, then give them VM name and username, and give them a password. I can choose the location anywhere in the world. So I can choose East US 2. Then I'm given a variety of options for virtual machine size. So you can begin with 2 CPU, 8 GB, which is a very tiny virtual machine. Maybe you can install it in maybe a B1 or tiny Netweaver system. And if you go down and scroll down, then you see the E series VM. So it's up to 64 BCPU, 432 GB physical memory. It's a quite large virtual machine. If you scroll down, M series VM that Jürgen mentioned in the beginning. This is actually give you as of today 1.75 terabyte, which is a memory size, a maximum memory size. And anytime soon, we are going to release a 4 terabyte physical memory virtual machine quite soon. Then it can be used for SAP HANA and also the big SAP NEDB environment. Believe me, just 4 terabyte physical memory. I'm not talking about storage size. I'm talking about memory size. So this is for virtual machine. So then Microsoft charged the customer by minute. So as long as you shut down the VM, we never charge it. We count just how many minutes you are running the VM. So maybe I can, for HANA database installation, I always kind of save the cost as much as possible. But from my experience, it's 56 GB physical memory. This would be an absolute minimum for to install SAP HANA. So you can use manage disk, network. So this way, I think it's going, in 15 or 20 minutes, the virtual machine is going to be provisioned in my subscription. Then I can install SAP, HANA software. I can install Netweaver. I can install S/4HANA. And also, we have a sample script in GitHub, how to automate SAP HANA deployment. So not just talking about only automating a virtual machine provisioning that I show you manually, but also SAP install itself, S/4HANA install itself can be automated using SAP Silent Install. So SAP, SAP installer have a capability to automate the installation using XML. And lastly, I just wanted to kind of show you, kind of Power BI, interoperability, integration. So, once I finish the installation of SAP HANA, so this is a Microsoft Power BI. It's a Microsoft BI, self-service BI solution. So this Power BI has, a standard connector for SAP HANA and also SAP BW. So once you click a database, you see the SAP HANA database connector here. So I can put the destination, server name, and also I can put the query, select query. So I already see the preview screen. Just did the initial connection from SAP HANA database. Then once I load the data, then I can quickly create reports on this Power BI dashboard. So I mean, this Power BI environment is interacting directly with SAP HANA in the backend. So I'm not just initiating any battle against SAP's BI solution or Tableau. Sorry, I think the connection failed. But I was trying to kind of show you, it's this kind of intuitive BI dashboard can be created very quickly and easily. I mean, so this Power BI is a free of charge, free download, and also SAP connector. It's built in. So without without paying any license cost for Power BI, you can play around this Power BI and SAP HANA BW connectivity. So we are not just only infrastructure. We can also kind of nicely surround the SAP HANA with Microsoft Power BI, Office 365, and Azure Active Directory, a single sign-on. And also we kind of announced, SAP HANA Enterprise Cloud on Azure, SAP on Azure, SuccessFactors on Azure. So this is the last slide that, this is a special offer. For those who are, using, the SAP environment right now, we can do a quick assessment. This is a special offer for customers who are running SAP. So we have a team of SAP experts worldwide. Then, once we get the input from you, our SAP architect can do, system assessment. Then, we can kind of provide a deliverable, like, to be SAP architecture for Azure. We can come up with multiple options, kind of small size, medium size, large size, and cost optimized or highly available plus DR. We have such, we can have such multiple options. And also we can help you to do ROI analysis. Eventually, we can show up in front of you to deliver 1 day, 2 days, 3 day SAP on Azure technical architecture session. So we have a team who is dedicated to kind of focus on SAP workload in the Microsoft team, and we can send such SAP expert to your office, and we can have architecture design session. So I hope this is a useful offer. I mean, not only the cloud infrastructure, we can also cover some surrounding area, like a Power BI integration and also Azure AD single sign-on to kind of tailor the Microsoft solution proposal for you. We never do any overview session. We tailor the proposal for each customer and each partner. So that is our intent of this special offering. Okay. So I think we are now at the time. Then be standing here 4 or 5. So for any question, please just reach out to us, and we have a Microsoft team to get any question. Thank you very much for listening.